I can't definitively say yes or no to this question, but what I can say is I see a lot of late diagnosed neurodivergent women who have CPTSD because they grew up not knowing they were neurodivergent. That alone is enough to give you CPTSD. If you add trauma into the mix, from parents, from school, a lot of neurodivergent people report being bullied. That neurodivergent child growing into an adult is incredibly vulnerable. So in that sense, yes, that pipeline creates a direct line into abusive relationships, narcissistic relationships. I can for sure say that is a thread and a pattern I have observed. But then on the other side of that, a neurodivergent person who has their needs met, even after abuse, even being able to escape a narcissistic family system, even having gone through narcissistic relationships, a neurodivergent person who has survived all of that, who now knows they're neurodivergent, have gotten to know themselves well enough to now be able to meet their needs and build a safe life for themselves. They have been putting the systems and structures in place to support themselves and their needs to create a safe life for themselves. When our needs are met and we have built a relationship with our body, we know ourselves very, very well. When we've built that relationship, neurodivergent people are bullshit barometers. We do not do well operating in a state of distortion. We seek the truth in every single environment we are in. We know when someone is deceiving us. We know when someone's lying. We know when someone's manipulating us. Our body will tell us. We are highly perceptive people. We usually can read energy. Neurodivergent people have God-given talents. When we utilize them, and the way we utilize them, the way we can tap into them, is when our needs are met. A neurodivergent person, in this sense, a highly awakened, in tune, self-aware neurodivergent person is a narcissist's worst nightmare, because narcissistic people really don't do well with authenticity, with truth, with vulnerability. A neurodivergent person, that's what we're about. We are highly authentic. That's what makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially if they're not living from their truth. And a narcissist, they have built their entire identity around a fabricated false self. So an unmasked neurodivergent person who's highly emotionally intelligent, highly self-aware, being authentic is even the energy of authenticity will pull down their mask. They don't know what to do with a neurodivergent person who is living from their truth and has the capacity to be able to do that because they have their needs met. So I keep repeating having their needs met because the distinction is vast. When you have a neurodivergent person who is deeply traumatized from not knowing they're neurodivergent, from living a life where they have never had their needs met, that neurodivergent person is incredibly vulnerable to narcissistic abuse. But on the other side of it, and in between, there's going to be so much nuance and so many different circumstances and experiences. I'm giving the two extremes. On the other side of it, an awakened neurodivergent person living a life where meeting their needs are at the forefront of their priorities, that neurodivergent person is much less vulnerable because they can see through your bullshit. They know. Not only can they see through your bullshit by building a safe life for themselves where they have the support structures and systems in place to hold their life and their needs They have the ability to act. That is the difference. When you have got support, cushioning, safety, structures, systems, you can act. That's your power. That's why it's so dangerous for neurodivergent people who don't know they are neurodivergent and have lived through chronic abuse and trauma. It's so dangerous for these individuals because they are so vulnerable when they don't have the support, because what they don't have is they don't have the ability to act. That's the vulnerability. Because how can a deeply traumatized, vulnerable, neurodivergent person who may not know they're neurodivergent, who doesn't have the support, how can they act? How can they? They don't have that luxury. So that distinction between the two extremes I am giving is vast. The difference between not being able to act because you are living in a state of chronic trauma, chronic vulnerability, chronic depletion, and the difference between having the support, the capacity, the luxury to act. That is the heartbreaking difference between a neurodivergent person being in the right environments with healthy people in their life, with the support and the capacity, compared to someone who just does not have the resources or the healthy people or the luxury to be in healthy environments. The difference is devastating. The impact and the outcome for this individual, I'm not saying it can't change, but the impact of not having your needs met as a neurodivergent person is detrimental. That is why education for neurodivergent people is absolutely vital. Being around the right people, listening to people who are well informed, talking to other neurodivergent people, talking to trauma specialists, working with trauma specialists, being in the right circles with the right people, having access to the right resources, the right information, the right education, being well informed is vital for this neurodivergent person. It's life-changing. Knowledge is power. That's why it's really, really important for this information to be as accessible as possible, especially for this type of neurodivergent person I am describing. It's the difference between them understanding what is going on, them having their truth mirrored back to them so that they may be able to then start taking the necessary steps for them to work towards a safer life. That is the difference. Neurodivergent people have spent years depleted, deprived of the vital, essential knowledge and education we have needed to be able to meet our needs. It's that serious. I'm 27. In school, only boys were neurodivergent. Only boys had AuDHD. There has been a massive number of neurodivergent girls who have been totally overlooked. Completely overlooked. I don't really buy into the whole girls are better at masking. I wasn't. It was incredibly clear that I was neurodivergent. How I was branded was I was the naughty girl. So I don't buy into the whole girls are better at masking bullshit. That's a really, really toxic way of looking at it, I think, because it's just not true. That's social conditioning, and I think it's a way that society tries to make it look and sound better, to smooth how much neurodivergent girls have been overlooked, to try and lessen the severity of the impact it has had for neurodivergent girls. I think it's incredibly obvious when there is a neurodivergent girl. Being neurodivergent is not hyperactivity. That is not what it is. That's a tiny fraction of what it is. It's not until recent years there has been a better understanding and clearer picture of what it means to be neurodivergent. So education is absolutely fucking vital. especially when you look at it from the picture I have just portrayed, from the deeply traumatized, overlooked, neurodivergent child who may have been abused. Education around this is the difference between that now adult being able to create a safe life for themselves, is having the truth mirrored back to them. Understanding how you operate so you can then meet your needs. The difference between not having that understanding and having that understanding, the difference is night and fucking day. It is that serious. Neurodivergent people, when their needs are being met and when they have built an incredibly strong relationship to their body, they can see and feel everything. They know when there is distortion in their environment, in the energetic field. Their body will pick up on it. Their body will tell them. In that sense, that neurodivergent person I'm describing is a narcissist's worst nightmare. So this is why knowing you are neurodivergent is vital, absolutely vital for your health, especially if you have come from a background of trauma, if you have gone through abuse, if your primary caregivers have been narcissistic, if they have been abusing you. Automatically, you are more susceptible to being in abusive relationships as an adult because that feels familiar. Our nervous system will always choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. We will always go back to what's familiar, even if it's not good for us. So the difference between a neurodivergent person who's deeply traumatized, has never had their needs met and may not know they're neurodivergent, compared to a neurodivergent person who knows they're neurodivergent, has built a safe life for themselves, has the structures and systems in place to support themselves, has built a relationship with their body, has been healing, has been getting to know themselves. That neurodivergent person is incredibly threatening to a narcissist. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance here. This is a really big conversation. Thank you for your comment because this has opened a really, really important conversation.